Welcome to another coloured pencil tips video. This week I want to talk more about skin tones. I have some videos coming up with colour recipes for darker skin, but I find Caucasian skin, fair skin, to be really quite challenging because of how we perceive it. Of course, my first love is drawing animals, but my passion for drawing human subjects has definitely grown. And the more I do, of course, the more I learn about skin tones. As usual, for realism, the most important part of your drawing is around the values, the darks and the lights, and this changes depending on the subject you're drawing and the surroundings they're in, which I'm hoping to demonstrate as I work through a few images and talk to you about what to really look out for when drawing fair skin. So if we take our first subject here, cute little baby, you know, if you're wanting to draw your grandchildren, your children, you want to start taking on human commission portraits, it's really important to understand how skin is made up and the colours that we use to create skin. And like I said, we're going to start with the fair skin because I think that is one of the most difficult to draw because we see it as fair, we see it as sort of like light pinks, light peaches, and inevitably what happens is we end up with a drawing that is far too light. And that's what I want to just briefly talk about in this video is around what kind of colours we can use to draw skin. And the first thing I'm going to do, and this is not something that I recommend for picking colours, it's something that I do just to demonstrate how dark colours are and what kind of colours it's more around the values really, what kind of value we're aiming for when we're drawing a portrait like this. If you look at this portrait, of course you can see all sorts of different colours. We can see there's some really sort of, in the nostril area here, it's almost like a dark cadmium orange in there. We can see some lovely sort of rosy cheeks here, which is probably a little bit of pink, maybe some pale geranium lake, just gently glazed over the top of some lighter colours. We can see some very sort of pale colours in here, and it's these pale colours and the really dark areas that we really struggle with. You can also see blues and violets in the skin, particularly when we're drawing babies. Their skin is very translucent. We can kind of see through it. You can see all these little veins and everything coming through. But our brain tells us that this is a fair-skinned child and we're going to use pinks, and mostly pinks really, pink and white. When we look at the eyes, again, you know, they're actually very dark. And again, another common mistake when drawing children, humans, we tend to draw the eyes a little bit too light, and we tend to draw the eyes how we think eyes should be drawn. And that's when everything starts to fall over. So I'm just going to use my colour picker tool here. And this is not because I'm picking a colour. When I choose colours, I choose them from memory. I might have a little bit of a play. If it's a colour that I'm not very used to using, I might have a little bit of a play in the corner of the paper that I'm using, just to kind of see, you know, what result I'm going to get. But usually I kind of know, oh, I'm going to layer this over this, over this, over this. What I want to demonstrate here is actually how dark these colours are. So I'm going to come over here. We can see it's that top colour there, that very pale sort of shell pinky sort of colour there. That is going to be your base really for the whole of this side of the face, this pale colour. That is quite a cool pink. We've got the light shining on this side of the face, so that tends to be quite cool colours that you would use here. That pinky colour there, I would be using something like probably a pink white in the luminance range, probably pink white combined with something like a buff titanium. In fact, a buff titanium would be a really nice colour to start here because it's not too pinky. It's kind of in the middle, and you can always tone it down with a slightly pinkier colour in there. You're not just going to put one layer of colour in there. If we come to the ear here, this is really orange. This is really orange. You can see there's like terracotta in there. There's India red in there. There's some really quite strong orangey browns in there. We've got some Venetian red in there. This is the problem when you're trying to use a colour picker to choose your colour, because can you see how I'm moving across the pixels here? The colour changes all of the time. So then you're like, well, I'll use this colour here, then I'll use a different colour, then I'll use a different colour. It's not about that. It's about getting the idea of this colour in there. So you might use a terracotta in with maybe a little bit of Venetian red, in with maybe a little bit of sanguine, and you might just sort of create this idea here. When we come over to here, this is a much more sort of peachy, and then of course we come into that much paler sort of pink white, buff titanium, that kind of thing. So really understanding your colours is important, but it's also important to understand the depth that we've got here. So here we're very light. If we come over to this side of the face, which is all in shadow, and we kind of bring the tool over here, the colour picker tool over here, this is really quite dark over here. And again, it's not about picking, oh, I've got to do everything in that colour, because you can see we've got paler bits, we've got some bluey bits in here, sort of purpley bits in there that don't necessarily, when I look at this, I see bluey purple here. When you put the colour picker on, it doesn't pick up on that. And this is where things start to go a little bit awry. You know, if I bring this into here, we can see this is starting to pick up some really quite darks in there. But when you look at it, this is definitely bluey coloured. You know, you can see the pale sort of violet-y colours going in there, and very pale blues in there as well. You know, we've got sort of like some light cobalt blue in there in the skin. If we come onto the nose, again, the nose is sort of quite orangey, but it's all about how we mix those colours together. So we're bringing in the lighter colours with the darker colours, you know, looking at how we're going to sort of bring these dark areas in here. This is very dark around the mouth. Another very common mistake is to go very pale on the face, and then it's much easier to get the values correct on dark subjects like a mouth, like the eyes, like the nostrils, and then the rest of the skin stays very pale. So that's something we've got to be really careful about. With this image here, this is still fair skin, but this is all around the lighting. This is very much around the lighting. We've got this strong light hitting the far side of the face, so anything that's sort of lifting up a little bit, so down over the top of her forehead, down around her nose, that little bit of a cheek there, anything that's just sticking out slightly, we're going to get the light hitting that, and then we're going to get all of that gorgeous dark shadow. The values in these dark areas are really dark. You can see there, that's a very, it's like Cassell's earth, dark brown in there. Really dark on her cheek here. You know, again, this is really dark. But if you were just to draw this and not check your values, you'd probably be thinking, hang on a second, this is crazy that I'm going so dark. In her eye here, this is really dark, and it's important that we capture the values, capture the depth of the values in there. It's really important. In fact, I think this piece here, this is something that I might do as a bit of a mini tutorial, just her little face here, because this is a great one to be talking about lighting, because if you look at the light areas here, this is really light. This is really light. This is almost like a white, you know. Here we go a little bit darker, but still really light. And then we've got this very dark area next to it. So it's very much around about the surroundings, around the lighting, as to, you know, how we're going to use those values. On her little arm here, you know, this is really dark. And we've got that light just where that light's hitting it. So again, really taking into account the surroundings of your subject, the lighting, working out what your values are going to be. Sometimes it's easier to change your piece into black and white. That way we're discarding any of the colour, and we're really understanding how everything is working with just values. This is something that you can do actually on a regular basis with your own work. You can take a photograph. You can have a black and white version of the photo you're working on. You can take a photograph of your drawing. You can switch it to black and white, and then you can actually have a look to see if your values match. We'll do that a little bit later on with the piece that I've just done, and just have a look at how the values match. And I'm guessing I probably haven't gone dark enough in there as well. This one here again, very much around the colours that are used in the background. So this is a very warm piece. We've got all of these lovely sort of goldeny, orangey colours around the subject. So when we come to look at her skin tones, they're going to reflect an awful lot around what is surrounding the subject. Also, if there's a filter been used or something like that. So you'll find this one has definitely got more of those orangey tones in. Even the lighter colours are definitely more orangey. They're more of that sort of peachy colour rather than it being pink. And again, this is really, really important to capture when we're doing a piece like this. I think it's quite nice to get a bit of a background in, but regardless of the background, when you're copying a photograph, go with the lighting that you've got. Try not to be changing too much, because you're just making your life a little bit harder. Once you get more experienced at drawing people, of course, then you can start to draw from life. You can, start to incorporate backgrounds. You can start to create from your own photographs. But when you're practicing, it is a really good idea to use a photograph and use what's offered to you in that photo. And you can see with this one, it's all around those sort of more peachy and orangey colours in here. Even the sort of those shadowy bits under her eyes, they've still got that sort of little bit of an orangey glow to them, purely because of how the subject is surrounded by that particular colour. So it's just really, really important. Now with this piece, if we were to draw this piece, the risk would be that everything would be too pale. We would go too pale everywhere. These areas here, this is sort of like a very pale peachy colour. I'd probably use something like the pale peach in the light fast range. I'm just trying to think of the luminance colours. Probably again something like a buff titanium. That's going to work quite well for these sort of pale bits, and of course you can layer bits over the top of them, but it's how you combine that with the colours that are next to them. So when you've got a colour this light with the nose there, and then you've got one next to it which is this colour, how do you get that to work without there being sort of like a really strong harsh line between them? Because that's basically, those are the values that you've got on her nose. You've got the light colour at the bottom, which is that highlight, and then you've got the darker colour at the top, which is the shadow. But when you look at the piece here, this doesn't look nearly as dark as it does on the on that colour wheel. It just doesn't look as dark. You wouldn't think it was as dark as that, but it is. It's really quite dark. So these are the things that we've got to be really, really conscious about. I've just given you a few ideas here as to some great colours that you can use for your portrait work. So it's not just about the pinks and the peachy, orangey colours. There's all sorts of things in there. And this is for those the pale skin, the fair skin. The Caran d'Ache Luminance have a beautiful range of colours, and I use these all of the time. The Warm Earth 5, the Warm Earth 10, the Warm Earth 70. These used to be called Dark Flesh, they're now called Warm Earth. Butternut used to be Warm Earth Light Flesh 5% or 10%. Now it's called Butternut. That's a really lovely yellowy, warm yellowy colour. Really, really nice for skin tones. Buff titanium, pink, white. Then you've got the percent colours of the ochre, the burnt and the brown ochre, and the burnt sienna. You've then got your violets in there, ultramarine violet. You've also got violet pink, which is a lovely colour. I haven't put in here. But anything like that, and you'll find your favourites. Caran d'Ache Pablos, the apricot, granite rose and cream. Great to have in your kit for your portrait work. And then the Derwent Light Fast, they've got again some really beautiful subtle colours. The pale peach, it used to be called like pink flesh, light flesh, something like that. Oyster, very bluey pink, very light pink. Mars Violet, amazing. It's quite a dark colour, but amazing for skin tones. Mars Black, again, very, very dark tone, but really good for in those really dark shadows. And the Heather and the Wild Lavender are just a couple of variations on those sort of purpley, violet-y kind of tones. And then you have some more stronger colours in the Faber-Castell Polychromos range. Ivory, of course, then you've got the sort of like the beige red, Pink Madder Lake, Pale Geranium Lake, some really, really nice pinky colours there. Rose Carmine, again, really nice pinky colour. Used as a glaze in over the top of other colours is really useful. Then you've got those very strong orangey and brown colours, burnt ochre, walnut brown, terracotta. Got the Caput Morton Violet in there, very dark tone for in the shadows. Raw umber, dark indigo and earth green. You might be thinking, well, where on earth am I going to put those? Honestly, you want to be getting all sorts of different spectrum of colour into your work, and it really, really does make a difference.